So this is an article I wrote 20 years ago. Literally 20 years ago. My Holland Vienna adds some reverb. Nice, that's sweet. You could, I mean, hey, you can post effect this all you want, especially if the signal's coming through clean with the new mic. So I wrote this article 20 years ago. It was one of the most popular articles on Pitchfork for like at least 5 years, and because it's an argument starter, it's bait. It's just bait. And it's like heavily biased toward, you know, where I was living in Boston, and like, there was no data available to back it up or whatever. So I was thinking, you know, because we go through Discogs and stuff, it'd be super funny to actually look some of this stuff up. Now, there's no way we're going to get through everything, and I'm not actually going to use this list because it's fucking embarrassing, like shit I wrote when I was 20, in my mid-20s. But I did look at some other stuff, like the guy that's Advice, Dan Ozzie, he wrote like a rip off of this, you know, years later, because I had a legal fallout with Pitchfork and they had them delete all my material. So you have to go to archive to find all the stuff I ever did there back in the early 2000s, and don't bother. Anyway, so it's funny though, because like, I mean, just at the top, like, who even remembers the Dambuilders? I mean, maybe Letters to Cleo, because what's his name from the You Talking You To It Me, that actor, he wore a Letters to Cleo shirt on some streaming show, and what a huge deal. Wow. Fucking whatever. Anyway, Letters to Cleo was a Boston band. Their drummer was great. He went on to do a whole bunch of stuff. I think he's the guy who ended up starting All American Rejects and being like the blonde singer of that band. He used to play on a like an oak kitchen chair, like a dinette set oak kitchen chair was his drum throne, which I thought was the weirdest thing. We had them play at Skidmore, and I still have a copy of the Letters to Cleo Aurora Borealis tape with a ketchup packet in it, because what's her name? Kay Hanley was like going nuts and going crazy, and they had like a food fight backstage. Yes, man, I don't miss being young. I miss being young, and I don't miss being young. But yeah, the Dambuilders Ruby Red and like all this stuff. Like, this is Kevin, what's his name? I talked about him in another stream. He was like the only studio knockout quality drummer in Boston, so he played on everything. But you know, a lot of this stuff, like, who remembers Cop Shoot Cop? Who remembers any of this? Nixon's Foma, I am definitely going to look up, because they're like an OU band from Norman. Like, I'm pretty sure they got signed while they were still, I'm not sure, actually, I shouldn't say that. I think they got signed while they were still at OU. But like, a lot of this, nobody remembers Bleach. Like, there's no point in being an asshole about these bands. Like, I was so mean, and like, it's just, that was the thing we did, you know, back then. We're like, oh, you know, we're going to fucking burn everything down. I'm a badass. Like, whatever. This shit's so stupid. But it was a big article, and it did cement in the web consciousness a number. Zach Lopez sure remembers Cop Shoot Cop. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is big time Zach, NYC Interscope Core. This is the kind of shit he definitely came up on. He got that in an industrial CD lot. I could see that for sure. But like Possum Dixon too, that was one that got huge promo. So there's like we've talked about these themes in a bunch of these streams. The reason that so many of these CDs are iconically overproduced and available in used CD markets is because the CD was the only format, and so it was cheap. And a lot of people don't understand this. From day one, CD was the best profit margin that record labels had ever seen and would ever see. And so they didn't give a crap about overpressing CDs, destroying CDs. Who cares? They're not worried like, oh, it's going to look bad if there's a bunch of used copy. Like, no one cares. We are just going to absolutely print the shit out of this and hope it sells, because it doesn't cost us much. The lead times, the complexity, and the expense of vinyl, gone. Cassettes, cassettes were embraced as a convenience, but they were an innately and obviously inferior medium sonically. There's no debate about it, and there wasn't in the 80s. But CD settled the argument, and it was affordable. So it was like, who cares? Just print a ton and just go. So, yeah, there's a ton of stuff in this old list that's just not even relevant. But number one is obviously R.E.M's Monster. There is no question this has been from day one the most common used CD in the world, and maybe not in the world, but the reason for it is because it was the follow-on from R.E.M. breaking through and becoming an enormous mainstream worldwide band. And it's, there's that. So it's hugely overprinted and it sucks. It's not a good album. It has this, it's their attempt to answer to grunge, and it's just a mess. And, it's just not good. I mean, Bang and Blame is just like this weird attempt for R.E.M. to go glam rock. Like it's their little Gary Glitter song. Yeah, I got a mystery used box and monsters in there. You can make all the hyperbole jokes you want. Any used CD store is going to have, at least 50 copies of this, and a big one will have over 100. I mean, they don't even take it. I mean, I don't think they stopped taking this ages ago. The quickest way to get a view into it is just like pull it up and just go for CD. So there's 1,700 copies of this on Discogs. Let's make it more or less worldwide, and that's just on Discogs. I don't know how that would compare to other big name like used CDs, because times have changed, etc., etc. I mean, this album is essentially dead, died on its butt. You can get a mint copy for €9. Someone's asking. That's hilarious. But yeah, this is the apex of landfill used CD. I'm shocked that there are only, less than 2,000 copies of this CD worldwide for sale on Discogs. I thought we'd have like a 0 at the end of that, but like Discogs is not like nearly as big as people think. Like once you start using it and living in it and really buying tons of shit through Discogs, you can you'll remember a lot of store names. Like it's not the whole world by any stretch of the imagination. So pretty sure Be Here Now is the UK equivalent of Monster. Yeah, there's no question that is also way up there. And to be honest, like when I did that article, I actually was going to use CD stores to talk to the record clerks about it in Boston, and I went to Kim's in New York and stuff just because I was there. And Bleecker Bob's and shit back in the 90s. So like it totally skews US bullshit. I did not there are a number of UK signature UK like overpressed, overhyped records that come up in these conversations. I mean, but you had the combination of me talking to physical stores and then also having my own biases and stuff. Like on my list, I had Ride's Carnival of Light. Like at volume, that really shouldn't be on a list of like the most common used CDs, because on volume, especially in the United States, there's no way it's going to approach that. It was just a question of the timing of when I did the article. And like at that time in England, like this was one of the few like UK data points I had. This thing, you couldn't give it away because it was a completely failed attempt to change their sound and jump on Britpop and be like, oh, we love the creation and let's go back to Yardbirds. And like, it was just such a miss because Ride were pigeonholed as a shoegaze band. So when they tried, similar to how Primal Scream tried to do like the whole Guns N' Roses are the last real band on earth, rock and roll bullshit, Rob Throb is, RIP. Speaking of RIP, man, what the fuck? Last 2 days, I wrote a bunch of tweets about Gary Smith passing away. I'm not going to get into any information about that, but I worked for him for right out of college for 6 months as an intern at Fort Apache in Boston. I got to meet David Bowie. He did a WBCN live to air thing during Earthling, and a couple of you have heard these stories before, but yeah, I mean, really sad to lose Gary. We lost. I think it was the same day or shortly after Van Connor from Screaming Trees passed. Obviously, Van had some significant health obstacles to begin with, and now David Crosby's dead. Which I don't know how David Crosby made it to 81. I mean, he was supposed to die in 1986, from massive drug abuse and ill health. I mean, Crosby's been. Life's been gravy for him for decades. So RIP to a legend, obviously. But yeah, I mean, so this is a good point, Martin, you're making. Like the Carnival of Light is an example of a flop. It's not an example of a common used CD. It's just a catastrophically funny flop where Ride decided they were going to go from doing, arch shoegaze to 8 Miles High, and it just straight didn't work. So yeah, I mean, there are errors like that in terms of my judgment. Jesus Jones is way up there, and I can tell you factually from current, like, last 2 years of brick and mortar, when I've started to be able to go back out post pandemic, Jesus Jones Doubt is still way up there, top 5. Like, there is no question. This is the kind of CD, a CD that had a big hit, was a peak CD gang, CD era release, and had a massive one-hit wonder. That's where you're going to see like shocking saturation of the used market. I would say Doubt is, if you add the real world and online, this is going to be top 10, top 5. So we had 1760 of Monster. We've got only 500 of Doubt. But this thing, it's funny too. Like, you gotta, like, you don't have to, but if you're me and you're like a Gen X person, Jesus Jones, when they came out, were actually cool. Like, they were not late on Grebo, sort of industrial pop or whatever. They were sort of like on it. And Liquidizer, Never Enough. Like this, I mean, Info Freako was a little too Grebo, but these guys were considered like relatively edge industrial pop. And I mean, like, when I was a kid, 13, 14, I was like, this is a cool band to listen to. And like, I hadn't heard, within weeks or a month or two, I hear Ministry's Land of Rape Honey, and I'm like, oh, no, whoops, you got a lot to learn. And then, so yeah, then they have Right Here, Right Now. I mean, honestly, Perverse might, if it existed, be more common, but like, so many copies of this were destroyed because this was such a fucking catastrophic flop, that it essentially just, it's not even there to be common. Like, this thing was erased. I don't even know, like, it might have been deleted. But, I mean, yeah, you're talking about 300 on Discogs alone. This thing is unlistenably bad. I mean, you talk about a difficult third album or whatever. Jesus Jones Perverse is an absolute train wreck of a record. Yeah, Jock, you mentioned Marcy's Playground. Like, American one-hit wonders like that, I'm not going to get into, like... I'm not going to get into Candlebox, Marcy Playground, fucking Matchbox 20, Live, like big, huge mainstream CD era stuff like that. Duh. The issue there is, it's like, people bought that CD, and if like they've aged out of, and they're older and they've aged out of the music they listened to when they were young, like, that's just a matter of course. It's not like there's sort of there's a little bit of a finesse to when you talk about a common use CD. Like, it needs to be sort of funny, that it's like funnily common and maybe shouldn't be. There's no data-based, logic-based reason that it would be funny or surprising that like Live's Throwing Copper or the American Express Third Eye Blind album is like available anywhere for a penny. Like, of course it would be, because tens of millions of people bought it when they were tweens and then like got into cool music later. And so, duh. I mean, most of these records are records that I would not find in a used store, because I wouldn't even look for them, because you can find them at a transfer station or a Salvation Army for nothing. There's kind of a ratio. It's like E.T. on Atari. Yeah, exactly. There's landfill CD gang, there's landfill used CD, and then there's kind of like, wow, that's hilariously asymmetrically everywhere. Yeah, like, and like, the flop Eminem albums, or the, big name rap crossovers where you got people who weren't like 100% committed to hip hop or whatever, taking a punt on it. Yeah, they're there all day. I mean, that stuff's kind of like absurdly apparent and obvious. But like a couple of those smaller ones, I am sort of curious about what ended up happening, because this was MCA's like big grunge bet. Only 135 for sale, but starting at a nickel. That sounds about right. Yeah, 104 copies worldwide on CD. And man, I mean, this is just some by the number shit. 39 cents, 95 cents, 99 cents. Yeah, absolutely. Like, literally sealed. This should be less than $1. I mean, why would you even buy it? But it's funny to see what the numbers are. Like I said, what was another one of those that was like, oh, and then like at the time too, when I wrote it, Sebadoh had like a hit. Like, Sebadoh had gotten on MTV, and their move to Sub Pop was a big deal. And so this was like a lot of people heard, it was Ocean, I think, or On Fire. They pushed this to MTV. Like, it launched with a video and everything. I still think the I Smell a Rat's pretty cute. But yeah, I mean, this was on the original list I wrote in 2003, for that reason. Now, I mean, I don't know if anyone even remembers Sebado. Whatever. Dinosaur Jr. has been back together for like 15 years, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah, surprisingly, this isn't as much saturation as I would have thought. On something that, like, again, this is one where people would have heard about it and it would have been promoted to them and they would have got it and be like, what the fuck? Because it's super sloppy and it's Lou. 50 Cent The Massacre. No, I know people remember Sebado. I'm kidding. Jesus Christ, I'm joking. God, the amount of Lou Barlow shit I have. One of the ones I really called out, and I frequently call this out, is the Melvins Stag, which is one of my favorite. It's like the first song, The Bit, is my favorite combination drum guitar production. Like, it's way the hell up there. It's so good. It's because it's the Melvins. Like, I've probably got like a bunch of deluxe vinyl reissues and whatever. But at the time, they had Houdini, which had the Kurt Cobain body heat, right? So Kurt Cobain produces Houdini. He doesn't do anything. He's like junked out, smacked out on the couch doing nothing. Buzzo has totally flamed him out and just been like, yeah, no. So Melvin's Houdini got a bunch of press, got a bunch of mainstream chancers buying it on a flyer. And then they came out with Stoner Witch, which was just completely unapproachable. And like, it opens with a completely shitty boombox recording of a sludge piece. And so by the time you get to Stag, Atlantic is pretty much like, well, this was a mistake, and the Melvins are the Melvins. And so, I'm surprised this isn't more freely available for nothing. It should be. It was. I mean, it was everywhere. And most of the copies would have the gold for promotional use only stamp on the cover. Similarly, I made a joke. The last Swerve Driver album in the contiguous era, Ejector Seat Reservation, like, there were no copies of that didn't have a promo stamp on it. 115 starting at $5. But stuff like that, it was just, when bands tailed off in that way, they would be everywhere. But again, these were call outs of records that were attempts to, there was mainstream, big time record labels just grabbed the first 3 Boner CDs for a few bucks each. That's nuts. I mean, if you got Bullhead for a few bucks, that's great. Or Gluey Porch or whatever. The early Melvin stuff, when they're still like really obviously and overtly lambing and stamping for Kiss, is like some of my favorite shit of theirs. I mean, I still think Bullhead is essentially 1-2 with Houdini from my favorite album of theirs. That's a great pull. I don't know how you would have found those, because Boner wasn't a big label. I mean, I have like I'm infamously a fan of Warlock Pinchers, who were on Boner as well, and like their stuff wasn't that easy to find at all. But this was another one I called out, which was Lush's big sellout record, Lovelife. There's like a duet with I think, is it Jarvis? There's a duet with someone on this. You got Lysol, Ozma, and Bullhead that's crazy. Yeah, no, The Massacre is definitely another one, the 50 Cent record. But yeah, this was one, like, let's see, there's 226 for sale. I mean, this is looking like the normative amount, like the 200 range for these. But man, this thing was rough. Not a great record, and really blew the whole thing out. I mean, Velocity Girl did the same thing. A bunch of these, bands that were coming up in like indie, shoegazy kind of ways, they tried to like, let's take it seriously, guys. Let's see if we can make a real album. They all totally sold out. Curve did it. All these bands did it, and Lush did it really bad on Lovelife. And so there you go. There's like 50 copies for $1. Again, like, it's common for a reason. It's not any good. I don't know why you would buy it, but it was at the time. Like, this and Catherine Wheel's Happy Days were absolutely, like, it was raining copies of these records all day. No one kept them. Everyone immediately sold them back. If you pay more than $1 for them, I don't know why you would. I mean, there's kind of a goof long jam song on this called "Eat My Dust, You Insensitive Fuck" that like for funny goof, you know, that'd be fine. I really like the first Velocity Girl record. So do I. Love it. The EP is even better before it. You know, they're Slumberland royalty, man. And then they were on Sub Pop for Copacetic, which was an awesome album. The first song on Copacetic, the halftime, I mean, God, they're so sloppy. The drummer is fucking terrible. But like Crazy Town, Audrey's Eyes, I absolutely love Copacetic. That's a great record. Just Velocity Girl went totally fucking south after that with that like stupid Pizzicato 5 looking thing. I don't know what that was about. But yeah, in the UK, like I would say at the time in the late 90s, Happy Days would be competing with Be Here Now. Like this fucking thing was a dog ass bomb. And like Fontana could not afford to have any more dog ass bombs because House of Love had broken up. They were in tough shape. So yeah, it's this is nothing. Judy Staring at the Sun is legit. All right, I'll give that another run. I don't recall that being particularly legit, but okay. I mean, listen, I'm barely there on Chrome on the second album. Right there, it's already starting to get a little shaky to me. Because I wanted what I wanted out of Catherine Wheel. I wanted Catherine Wheel to be black metallic and salt and be a, you know, wall of sound, you know, like, you know, slow glacial shoegaze thing. And that was just over here. I will give it a listen. Thanks for the call out on Judy Staring at the Sun. I don't even remember it. I gotta be honest. Yeah, we've joked before about ash, and we don't need to get into that again in the stream. I mean, ash is like, yeah, that's used to like fill in, you know, holes in your walls. Like there's so many, it is coaster class. Like Ash's 1977 is absolutely drink coaster class. There are so many goddamn copies of that all over the UK and Ireland and everywhere. Another one, absolutely comes up all the time. I just saw this in the record store that I did the haul out of for Led Zeppelin, is It's Great When You're Straight. So on the back of the Mondays, you know, like they're going to get together and they're going to start a big beat band, and that's the move, you know, like Bez is on it still. So like the Monday, I mean, I think a lot of this is a legal situation too, because the Mondays fuck their shit so bad legally. They get with a new label because they're Black Grape now, and you know, the chance that they would, you know, reconstitute themselves after the disaster of Yes Please, which is just one of the most infamous train wreck albums of all time. You know, this one, what am I doing here? Why did this come up this way? Sorry. It's strange. Where's the more copies for sale? This is not even close to how many copies there are. Let's just pull up. I'm trying to pull all versions. I hit the wrong thing. Okay. So $3.95, whatever. I mean, this thing is ever. And listen, the reason I mention this one is for $1, get it, because there's a couple of really good post-baggy big beat tunes on this, that you can get, you know, like I say, for nothing. I mean, you'd be silly to spend more. Well, yeah, Odie, that is in the list. That's in the original list. It's in the top 5. Like it was everywhere. And there's a pair to it as well. But yeah, I mean, here you go. 40p, 50p, 50p, 50p all day. In the UK, this thing is, I mean, it's free. And like I said, I you know, talking used CDs, I've had this forever. Reverend Black Grape is an awesome jam. I mean, if you like the Mondays at all, if you like Kinky Afro, and especially like, you know, the deeper cuts on that, you know, that's a record. This is a record rather. It's got like 3 or 4 decent songs. I mean, a lot of it is half-written bullshit, but it's a pretty good time. You know, I use the foil to make solar panels. This is, you know, unlike the rest of them where it's just kind of like mocking failure and not really contributing anything positive. Black Grape is one that I would say, considering the fact that you essentially get it for free, I would, you know, versus like a Jesus Jones Doubt or whatever. But, you know, going back to like American, weirdly like crazy everywhere. Oh man, this was some rough shit. So this is this is like post like the wave of Pearl Jam blowing up. Oh, just so appalling. And like this was in every American college kid's dorm room at 420. It's like this, the Spin Doctor's Pocket Full of Kryptonite. Later, you know, you get like what was that Mad Season record? Oh, I mean, this thing was astonishingly everywhere because everyone thought they were going to get more of the, of what you want. They're sending that to the college radio spot. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this was a weird time. A bunch of dumb bands got signed that shouldn't have got signed. I wonder too about that Mad Season one. I mean, most of this stuff is coming up at 100 and whatever, but Mad Season's above, man, on Columbia. Yeah, 413 copies. Oof. Yeah, this thing, again, this got handed out to you when you went to college in America in the mid-90s. It was just everywhere. And it was definitely filling up the shelves. This did not survive the Beer Reaper. And that's sort of the thing with all of this. When the Beer Money Reaper comes calling, this isn't making the cut. It's gone. So Google images, creepy black and white. There's 972 Throwing Copper CDs. Yeah, I mean, again, there's probably 100 Matchbox 20s. What was it, Yourself or Someone Like You or whatever. I mean, yeah, that's big time out there. I'd one up you, Ash, on the Tracy Chapman ST in terms of college dormcore. The answer there is Ani DiFranco. And that was not on the original list, but should have been. This album, oh my God, Not a Pretty Girl and Living in Clip. These records, I mean, it was so silly. I don't think I went into a single young woman's dorm room that this was not in it. The entire time I was in college, one of these two or both was there. And I mean, look, there's only a couple hundred or 100, but 50 cents all day, 50.99 all day. These are such iconic, as much as Alanis Morissette in the mainstream, universe, in terms of 20 something men and whatever, everybody, she got a big name and tons of people bought this because they were supposed to. What's always in used bins, the Misfits come back out. I mean, any late period Reformation Misfits is going to be in a garbage bin. But yeah, I mean, that would be my counter to Tracy Chapman, would be these Ani DiFranco records. They were just everywhere. And then it's funny because she's one of those artists where the band Rancid, the American crust punk, whatever, sellout band, these bands got big during one college window. So they have a 5-year rip where one sort of college class and the ones immediately around them get told or discover them, or it's their stuff. And then the next wave, 3 years younger or whatever, they got to find their own shit and their own identity. So that stuff is not cool. And then those people graduate and start their lives. And all of a sudden it's oh, I'm not making a lot of friends putting Rancid on at parties. So they sell that shit. I mean, I made that joke about McCluskey and all the early 2000s stuff like that. The honkin' post rock shit. And it's just this this totally observable, repeatable pattern of stuff that hits a certain age range and then is rejected by the up and coming next range, and at the same time the age range that had embraced it is no longer of the age where it's age appropriate. So this is part of those dynamics of used CD collecting. It's so funny when you observe and see these trends, and it just has to do with the fact that physical media created these ladders, these ebbs and flows of behaviors that are tied to the fact that you had to acquire an object to participate in music. This whole vibe, this whole feeling is all totally past and delineated in the past. And I'm not going to be oh, streaming ruined it, because there's, no one's going back and streaming, shit that was blown, washed out, it was, maybe getting recycled. But everything now is about the whole starter pack, whatever, I'm going to go be into this genre that was around then, and I got my playlist and I'm going to explore it. It's annotation at worst, and it's sonic archaeology at best, but there's no industry and there's no time frame and there's no capital expense tied to streaming or to trends anymore. So the relational behavior of a music fan and of the music industry is completely obliterated, which is fine. But it creates this freeze, this sense of a really defined past that I lived through. And I never really thought about it I never really thought about it as being like, as I say, so hard and fast observable until we started, till I started collecting, and I also stopped like really, like I'm aware of current music, but like I stopped thinking about it. I don't think about new bands. I don't care. Like I'm not invested in them. If they're good, great. I'll check them out. I still love to hear new music. It's the best. But like I'm way aged out of music dialogue. Like just, it would be silly. I mean, I see people my age that are still participating in it, but for me, that's just similar to like, I don't put on X at a part. Like I'm not putting the Jesus Lizard on at my kid's birthday party. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like SLC Punk. Like I didn't sell out, I bought in. I still rock that stuff all the time. And my older kids love some of this stuff and everything, but like at some point you got to like know your age, like know who you are at every age. Thanks, Liz Fraser, Cocteau Twins. And for me, like I'm an observer for that stuff. So this whole thing of collecting and a different way of talking about the past that's not like judgmental and being a music critic, that started for me when I quit social media in like 2016 or thereabouts. And then you could tell in the stuff I was writing, like the Goldfish Bowl, and it got very theory based and like really long, some of it. And everything started to become a rear view mirror for me, which doesn't preclude me from having enjoyable kind of like theory volleyball with myself in my head. But anyway, sorry, that was a tangent. Landfill indie is a big bargain bin fodder. Yeah, particularly in the UK. I mean, that is a hugely different thing because you were still so heavy with CD when the Libertines and Doherty and all that shit happened, and Amy Winehouse even, she's the demarcation point of that kind of ending. Block Party all day. Oh my God. And Weekend in the City has like one of my favorite songs of theirs. Let me pull it up actually. I mean, look, obviously their early EPs into Silent Alarm, like it's not a question. That's, they're best first. Like that's what they are. I get it. But I actually really, you can see I got it on Discogs. I got it like a cheapy copy. Weekend in the City, I mean, as a sophomore album that you would expect to catastrophically stink out the joint and suck, I don't think it's bad. And I think On is one of the best songs they ever wrote. I really love it. But yeah, look, you got 526 copies worldwide. I have 2 copies of this. Before I figured out or started using Discogs properly, I accidentally rebought this for like 50 cents. And it worked out because I got 2 different copies. I got the Vice copy and then I got the UK copy. So what a waste of rack space. But it's not a good album. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the opener and I really do love On. And I mean, look, to get On for 30p, get it. Like, it's a great fucking tune. Wow. This is all day in the UK. Yeah, that's a big one. Weekend in the City B-sides. They're really good. Yeah. No, I like it. I rep for this. Paramore are now repping for Block Party with their new album. Have to see. Suzanne Vega's on my list, and it's an album I've talked about so often that it's kind of redundant. Unfortunately, like I've hammed on this so many times. Everyone should have it, and you can get it for nothing. Why is my auto search not working? Weird. Let me just pull this up. The album 99.9 Degrees Fahrenheit was Suzanne Vega's like producer driven like modernization effort. Like she's got drum loops and crazy industrial clanging and shit. This is one of my favorite records. And like I mean, from the day it came out, I was in love with this record. There's something to be said about how Suzanne Vega has this kind of like her personality as a musician appeals to like certain types of, it's hard to explain. She has this tone that is really assured, but also foggy and mesmerizing. And you can get this all day for nothing. And this record has legitimately like 5 outstanding songs. The entire, like Blood Makes Noise, In Liverpool, 99, the title track, and Blood Sings all in a row. These are all like 8 to 10 out of 10 songs. The title track is one of my favorite tunes ever. Like, it's so cool and so original for 92. It was just super rad of her to go this way, and I love this. If you're in my movie too, that's great. Really cute tune. So yeah, definitely This Is When You Want, and I ripped this album cover off super overtly. I don't know I'll pull it up. Hold on. How am I looking in Discogs? I haven't checked in a long time. Oh yeah, this picture's in there. This was a goof back when, but I ripped that cover off so hard. So Static Caravan in the UK was like a hip IDM electronic label. And we talked after I had done the stuff on Darla, and they put out this 7-inch called Mod Killer. You're missing both the whole thing. But this is the Mary Hopkin album on Apple Records that Paul McCartney was like in love with her and put out. And I did the 99.9. I figured out how to do this in like fucking Paint Shop Pro, like to do the chroma key, and learned all that shit and absolutely ripped it off. And yeah, that's where that came from. Rat-a-tat Bro. Yeah, Rat-a-tat was the brother of the guy who ran the label that I was on. This is all like the bullshit I put out in the late 90s and early 2000s, loop music stuff, when I was like wanting to be like everybody was like, I'm going to be DJ Shadow. Good luck, dude. Anyway, back to the used CDs. Let's get back on topic. A record I have talked about before, but was one of my heavy features. And again, this is cross, US and UK and Europe. This record was so much. I can't believe this. There's only 62 copies of this for sale in Discogs. Wow. This is such a good album. I mean, this is like a ex-blonde UK band that tried to address shoegaze, and they really did a good job. Sure Thing, Gently Fall, One Thing Leads to Another, I real Please Yourself. I love this record. It's just such a good record, and it's free. And I like the Darling Buds all the way through, frankly. Pop Said is a little sketchy. I mean, Pop Said is like Primitives, going on top of the pops and shaking it. But Crawdaddy and Erotica all day. Crawdaddy has like tons of Pixies ripoffs on it, because the Pixies were everything then by 90. So this is like their Pixies ripoff record with Makes No Difference and Crystal Clear. They're so good. I mean, again, like the politics of music in 1990 are long gone. So the fact that these bands were considered like face bands with like a pretty singer and bullshit major label money, nobody cares anymore. I mean, the Sundays were fucking despised by the English music scene when they came out. I mean, hated by everyone. Creation Records artists just bagged on them all day. Their first record's great. Who gives a shit? It's a Smiths ripoff. It's college students, university kids doing their bullshit. Fine. Who cares now? It's all music. Like, for any of the hagiography and nostalgia you could feel for the past, and some of the positive and interesting aspects of having lived through a physical media age and lived through a press-based age, there's a lot of cool shit. There is a lot of cool stuff that I feel like was rewarding and like helped shape who I am and who music fans, Gen X old people are and stuff, that isn't there for kids today. But there's tons of shit that offsets it. And one of the things though that isn't offset that's still happening is people constantly trying to bust bands. And I don't know, man, it never goes away. Like back then, the issue is like, this band's on a major and they're bypassing having to build an audience with good music because the record label is spending money on ads and they're buying out the theater. That's a legitimate thing to complain about. Bands like Sonic Youth and the whole like underground indie 80s thing, that was their legitimate argument. That was their problem. The music industry was silencing them because they couldn't compete with their money. That's a legitimate dichotomy. Okay, so it gives some valor to indie rock and punk rock and underground shit. There's also the artistic question of what is and isn't allowed on a major label. And so there's the art question of independent music. Like, these conversations are still happening, but they've been dimensionally sort of pivoted. And I don't know whether they have any value or the same. But anyway, let's keep going. I went on some tangents. Boom. I mean, this thing is top 5. Filter's Short Bus. So, Hey Man, Nice Shot is like the X Games extreme 90s anthem of all time. This is the watered down 9 Inch Nails smash hit that every record label was looking for, and they got it. I mean, this thing, 277 for Discogs just isn't as big as people think, man. This thing, I saw 4 copies of this at the store I was at last week, 2 weeks ago. 4 copies of this in their used CD stacks all day with this thing. And I mean, like, do you want to get it? I don't know. I mean, what is it? It's the keyboard player from Nine Inch Nails or something. Their touring keyboard guy started his band. And then, you know, the funniest thing is not only did they have this huge posy kind of softy wannabe industrial pop crossover smash, they took like, I don't know how many years off. It was like, yeah, 4 years. And then they came back with Title of Record and they had a legit mainstream fucking enormous smash with Take a Picture, which is a ripoff of Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill, but who cares? It's great. Hey, Dad, what do you think about your son now? I mean, like similar to Everclear, right? Father of Mine, like this became like a vein somehow in the late 90s for a minute. It was like bad dad anthems. Like, you walked out on me. Here's my drop D bar chord anthem about it. I love both those songs. I mean, whatever. But yeah, man, fuck, Filter all day. Both those albums, Title Record and Short Bus, everywhere. I mean, like, I don't need to pull up No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom for you to know that similar to all this other stuff, it fell victim to all those themes and all those issues that lead to an oversaturated used CD. And it does bleed into nu metal, some of that too. Porno for Pyros. Left his hand and came back for Porno for Pyros. Nice. Every time I hear a Hey Man, Nice Shot, I think of the X-Files episode with Giovanni Ribisi. So do millions of people. This is another thing, you know, we've talked about in some forums, which is, you know, I did a video on music supervision. So look, I've done some music supervision on a consulting basis. I don't talk about it. I don't talk about my real life ever, but I have done this on a consulting basis. Again, I didn't work as a credited music supervisor, and it's immaterial, but the point is I have like some vantage into that industry, and I did a whole video about it. And like recently I wrote an article, kind of a follow-up article on my Substack, which is shallowrewards.substack.com. This was like a year ago, I think. And I went into kind of like a lot more detail about, and well, it wasn't that long ago, what am I talking about? But I went into more detail about some of the issues with music supervision. And when you mentioned it, we were just talking about the use of Never Let Me Down again in Last of Us. And like, that's such a tell, because the showrunner clearly remembers that from 21 Jump Street. Like 21 Jump Street was the edgiest shit on television in 1988, 87. Like, it made Johnny Depp a star. It broke Fox in as much as Married with Children or The Simpsons did. 21 Jump Street made Fox seem like an incredibly hip station. Like, Fox was Netflix in the late 80s. It was really fucking cool and had transformationally different and more mature and edgy programming. Chief among it, 21 Jump Street. And there's an episode where they're all high school narcs. Like, that's the theme of 21 Jump Street. And there's an episode where there's like this thing, like apparently in the imaginary world of the showrunners, there's this trend where teens are standing on moving cars, like as a dare. So like this girl who's crazy and afraid of nothing, and she's out of control. She's in this Mustang, I think, with Johnny Depp, and two, like, you know, some kind of wonderful Chad bros pull up in like a VW fucking Golf cabriolet, and she's standing with one foot on the door of each of the cars going down the street, and like, oh God, she's gonna die. And they're playing Never Let Me Down again by Depeche Mode. And I just, like, the fact that they put that in Last of Us, I was like, yeah, I remember that episode of 21 Jump Street too, Neil. Way to go. And that's the thing that kills me, is how obvious, if you're their age, the choices so many of these music supervisors make. Like, just, it's not, they're trying to balance the commercial, you know, potential of the choice. They're definitely trying to make sure it's something that's going to get buzz and get, you know, social media, like, oh my God, I know that song. Like, so these choices are extremely, like, multi-layered. And you can't just be like, I'm going to do something cool. But that Natasha Lyonne show, I'm blanking. What the hell was it called? She did this show where in the trailer, they used Russian Doll, sorry. In the trailer of Russian Doll, they used Bela Lugosi's Dead by Bauhaus, and it was fucking sick. Like, that was one of the best needle drop stroke cues I've seen anyone sync in a long fucking time. And I wrote about it in the article I was telling you about. And then there's like shitty music supervision, which is like Yellow Jacket. Like, Yellow Jackets, that's bullshit. Yellow Jackets is just like fucking playing songs all day to try and get your shit over and give it context. Stranger Things was never as bad as Yellow Jackets, but Stranger Things wasn't great either. It was really, I mean, full respect to Nora Felder. She established and transformed the universe as much as, there's a really famous English music supervisor that also did great stuff like this. But, I mean, Stranger Things is the epitome of this. Like, they printed money off of music supervision in a way that no other show I can think of did. Anyway, all right, so off that tangent, how much time do we have left? 15 minutes? What should I do in 15 minutes? I already talked about Sunday's Ministry. I've talked about it a million times. I would definitely be curious to see how many copies of this are out there. Songs of Faith and Devotion by Depeche Mode. This one, holy crap, was this ever... Yeah, we're over 1,000. That's not bad. So I Feel You, even if it's just a rewrite of Personal Jesus. Walking in My Shoes, again, this album is like, Dave Gahan is like getting really bad with heroin, and we're just going to re-rush out a proxy photocopy of Violator because it did really well. It's not an original album. Like, if you're a critical Depeche Mode fan, this one you're a little judgmental of. But there were so many people. Their audience, particularly in America, had just gone from strength to strength. From 87, Music for the Masses, Never Let Me Down Again, like I told you. And then the explosive, 101 concert and live album that did so well. Like, they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, by the time of Violator, it was nuts. Like, Depeche, Morrissey, they were cresting huge with American kids. And Songs of Faith and Devotion is like the peak the peak starting to tip. And this is really where it tipped. It tipped a lot. And so, yeah, I enjoy this record. I enjoy, a few songs on it, but this is an absolute classic landfill UCD all day. You'll find that everywhere. Wonder how this is held up. All DM feels expensive to me. I'm sure in the anywhere in the UK, like, you shouldn't be paying much for DM, any DM. This one I'm just curious about because this was like a really pathetic Instamatic attempt to sign a 9 Inch Nails by Columbia. This got, oh my God, there's only 70 copies of this. That's hilarious. This thing was everywhere. Oh my God. I can't even tell you. And it's so awesome too. It has the shitty generic Columbia spine. This got hyped like, it was supposed to be the biggest thing ever. But, again, time's passed and this is just not, apparently this just is not as common. I mean, I still see it in retail, for sure. I still see that in retail. But I would have thought there'd be a lot more of that. All right, well, I'm getting to the end. I have a couple more. I mean, this one is like, this is very close to Monster in terms of global oversaturation of an album that just was pressed and put everywhere. Like, There She Goes was a monster hit. And, look, at that time, it's not like everyone who would have been enticed to buy There She Goes would have appreciated the fact that this is a fucking perfect album. Like, despite how shittily and oversaturated the Law's whole story went, and Lee Mavers' whole story went, this record's perfect. Like, it's a 10. There are so many. I mean, I like Feelin's one of my favorite songs on this record, over and above There She Goes. I love that chord change. The inverse chord change out of the chord. It's so good. I mean, Timeless Melody, that Mike Hedges did a mix of this that's on the deluxe that's better. Son of a Gun. Oh man. Like, hearing Lee Mavers twang, wah, like, it fucking rules, man. And like, his lyricism and his couplets are so fucking strong. Like, and you can get it for nothing all day, wherever you are in the world. This record is free and it's flawless. Like, I mean, it's one where you just have to put aside the fact that it's there. I mean, like, I'm not going to look up the shitty American band that covered this for like the fucking One Tree Hill soundtrack or whatever, Sixpence None the Richer. They like, that's a whole other, that could be like a half an hour. If you wanted to talk about like WB Core in America, the Warner Brothers channel, like WB Core, Dawson's Creek, The OC, One Tree Hill, like all these shows, this was a whole new generation of shows coming up in the late 90s and especially the early 2000s, where they were realizing that syncs and music syncs supervision was helping the show feel fresh. It was like a way to get away with what was functionally no different than like Swan's Crossing or any other fucking shitty American soap opera, but you get more saturation on your post-processing on the film and make it hotter and make it a little edgier, and then you get cool, you know, music like California. Like, you know, that shit was such a fucking moment. Like, before streaming, that was the music sync world, was all those shitty, like, early 20s tween targeted, you know, 13, 14-year-old targeted, this is what it would be like to be 25. It actually killed somebody. And, you know, the infamous, like, I mean, SNL made that parody about it, whatever. It was a thing. But, you know, we're far enough away from it, 20 years, that a lot of people, you know, they're not going to remember that, except the people who lived through it, right? So people who are like, you know, in their mid and late 30s now, are definitely like, that's their halcyon days. You know, it's like the Strokes, the OC, all that shit, the Hills, and all the reality show shit. Man, that's a whole legit world. The same way mine was the real world and Nirvana and shit. And My Bloody Valentine. Speaking of music supervision, blows my mind Burial hasn't shown up. Well, I can't talk about that. Wednesday Addams, yeah, there's another one. I mean, they tried with the guy from MCR's show that they did with the superheroes League of what the hell was that called? I already forgot it. I watched it. I mean, it fucking died so bad in the second season. It was unbelievable, but that was pretty strong. Umbrella Academy, yeah, that's what Gerard Way like wrote that graphic novel or whatever. I thought the first season of it was pretty enjoyable, but man, did they fucking take a dump on themselves in the second one. They lost it. And I mean, the third one is just like unwatchable. What would be another one? What would be a good one to close on? I mean, yeah, we sort of did Adam Curtis owns Burial Sinks. So somebody mentioned New Order's Republic. This was a big repeat offender for UCDs and still is. So you got 716 copies of this across all formats. The cool thing about this is I mean, it's not a good album. For a lot of reasons, bass mechanic being among them. But the cool thing is the special edition. So you want to get the Life Jacket edition of this because you can for nothing, and it's funny. And there's two versions of it. There's one with blue print, and there's one with silver print. I don't know I guess I'd have to go back to the specific thing. But since we're talking about, you know, buying UCDs, and that's what this channel is supposed to be, let me specifically drill down to that edition, because it is a cool, funny thing to have, and it ain't expensive. So do they have two entries for it or one? 87 versions of Republic. Huh. Yeah, they do have a second one for the metallic print. So yeah, there's two versions of this. I have them both because it didn't cost anything. $15, come on. So there's the blueprint, which was the US. Oh, also this is literally the ugliest CD ever made. Like actual CD. This is the ugliest compact disc ever printed. It's not even a discussion. What the fuck is that? Like Orange Fruit Loops on fire? Like this, everyone was so done with Factory and New Order at this point. You know, wow. And it's rough too, because I do think Savile, like, this is an incredible image, and I don't like the cover. This should have been the cover. This was the cover of the Regret single. This should have been the cover to the album. I mean, it would improve its prospects significantly. Now, as far as the music on this, it 100%, the only good songs are the first three. This thing is front loaded, like unapologetically front loaded, as it's a joke. There's nothing after Spooky that you're ever going to listen to. I think Barney raps on Everyone Everywhere. That's always a good sign. But anyway, this one apparently you can get cheaper. The metallic printed one. So this one's different. Like, I think this is the one that has the cards in the middle. But yeah, all day, if you find a copy of this for like $4 or $5, it's a fucking hilarious special packaging joke. And if you, I mean, obviously you want to be a New Order fan or you're not going to bother, but Regret's one of their best singles of all time. I mean, you know, in the New Order Story documentary, Neil Tennant, I think, from Pet Shop Boys, right? They ask him like, "What's your favorite New Order song?" And he kind of blubbers and he's like, "It's Blue Monday." And, no, it's Regret. And like it's one of the ones he mentions. I mean, I think he ultimately settles on Thieves Like Us, which is I mean, if you like, that might be the most underrated New Order song, Thieves Like Us. But anyway, Regret is phenomenal. I loved it, and I talked about it in the recent Cure podcast about Wish. This came out a year after High, the High single, but they're very similar songs. Like this really does feel like an answer to how the Cure were approaching the early '90s in so many ways. Oh, it's one of my favorites. And New Order love it, and they did great with it. And there's an awesome video of them playing it on the set of Baywatch with David Hasselhoff just being like mugging with a surfboard. Shit rules, man. It's so funny. And they were so fucked up. Peter Hook totally like spills the tea all over the fucking place in the book Substance. I've talked about it before. If you give a shit about New Order at all, you have to get Peter Hook's Substance book. The amount of dirt he dishes in that is absolutely off the fucking chain. Bernard Sumner was puking in a plastic bag throughout the entire Regret shoot. And Hook himself was totally fucking hungover. God damn, it's so funny. But anyway, yeah, this album is everywhere, and the fact that there's this special edition is kind of nice. So that's one I would keep, keep in mind, because I think it is worth getting. So much coke. Oh yeah. Well, not as much coke as fucking Gretton. Like I can't believe that can't be real, but like it has to be real because he got sectioned. So they medically evaluated what was going on. I mean, what I'm saying here, the estimate is that New Order's manager, Rob Gretton, who has passed away, was up for 10 grams of cocaine a day. 10 grams. Like he 5150'd. He went totally nuts. They had to section him. 2 doctors in England, you can do this. 2 doctors were like, this person's fucking insane and they're going into a sanitarium now. And he got sectioned and hauled out. He was like throwing shit out his window. I think I told the story before of how he was going to help Man City win by painting himself green and running around naked so he'd be invisible on the football pitch and score goals for Man City, and that's how they were going to win the championship. Yeah, that's how far gone that dude was on blow. That's a real story. It's fucked. Anyway, I'm probably going to call it here because I only have 3 minutes left and I don't want to get into anything. There'll definitely be a part 2 of this. Just on the list I already had, there's like 10 things I didn't get into. And like, also, if you want to get in the comments section, I'm going to do my YouTube bumper. Hey, if you want to get in the comments section and smash that like button, really want to make sure you subscribe to the channel. New updates every Thursday and Sunday. But yeah, if you want to get going in the comments section, I mean, we did start this at the iconic number of 285 subscribers today. We got to 285. But the hours watched are really strong. So if we can get it up to 1,000 views, we're in monetization country pretty much now. We have to get up to 1,000 subs though before we're eligible for AdSense or whatever the fuck they're calling it. But yeah, appreciate people getting it around, trying to be broad topically. You know what I mean? Like this is not like, I don't want this to be all like hipster shit every time, but it's this topic allows for that because there's just so many different ways that UCD collecting is like interesting but also valuable and like in some respects even controversial. So definitely you want to see a jungle one, I'll pull out my Vienna Tone compilation. We can put on some like minimal D&B farmer's manual. Like it's been a while. Anyway, I want a picture disc of the Fruit Loops on fire art. Yeah, Gabriel, that would be an incredible one. I honestly don't think I could do an episode on YouTube because it's like doing an episode on Pearl Jam. I mean, it's everywhere. It's all everywhere. It's always going to be everywhere. Most people would not bother buying YouTube physical media anymore because like casual listeners have migrated to streaming. Even boomers have migrated to streaming. Like no one wants CDs hanging around except the TikTok mom. And us dorks. Like, I mean, it's a very pointed thing to suggest that this is a value exercise and something that you want to get into. It's very intentional, and it's got all kinds of dimensional nostalgia and whatever. I just think like the U2s and Pearl Jams of the world, I don't know like what's even the differentiation point. The store I was at 2 weeks ago when I got all that Zeppelin shit, they had October, they had War, they had Boy, like you can get it anywhere. And I don't think that's why all streaming is heavily skewed to old music. Yeah, for sure. The jam band video, I was going to do a video back when I was doing DSLR videos on jam bands, just because I had like ancillary youth exposure to it, because you would go to those shows to get drugs. Like, not that you gave a shit about the music. But I really don't know shit about that, and I don't really have time to prep for these, so we'll see, whatever. I mean, look, in the next used CD part, in the part 2 of this, Fish's live one is definitely, like, that's in the, like, that was everywhere. So there's definitely, like, you know, I mean, but like DMB is so basic that's not even, right? Like, that's not interesting. Like, Fish is enough of a headband that it's sort of interesting in a way that they had mainstream crossover and people who were like, you know, grew out of it. And lots of people who never did. So anyway, thanks for joining and sticking with it. This time out, I need to find my term window. Where the heck is it? Did I close it? I think I did. So anyway, yeah, thanks again. We'll see you Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern. As I say, that one's targeting hopefully UK and EU folks.